Okay, so I guess first off, as soon as this ruling came down a week ago, we went to the Hinckley Institute. Their prediction was, looking in a nonpartisan manner, that no matter what, this was going to be a turbo race to the courts. It hasn't been. It's been a week of silence.
Yeah, well, it's been really hard because obviously this is going to continue through the court process and we will continue to appeal. But the unfortunate part is this judge drew it out until the very last minute. The Lieutenant Governor's office and Lieutenant Governor said November 10th is the drop dead line. This judge drew it out until 11:41 p.m., 19 minutes before the November 11th, and which then tied our hands because we couldn't go to the courts and say, please allow us to make an emergency appeal because the deadline had already passed. So in order to get the elections ready for 2026 and for the filing, which happens in January, the judge, or the Lieutenant Governor said it has to be, we have to have the maps by November 10th. That's come and gone. And so we can't do an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court. Now, we will continue to appeal to the Supreme Court, but the deadline's come and gone, and that's a sad part.
And the deadline was for this upcoming 2026 election, so you can appeal, but it'll be elections down the road.
Yeah, and I just want to point that out, and I hope people realize how important that is. We had a judge that just took away the people's voice, right? The legislature is elected by the people. Vox Populis sits above the dais in the House, which is very important to us. We represent the people. We had a judge that took away the people's voice in making that appeal to the Supreme Court because she waited until the very last minute. Keep in mind, these oral arguments happened in January. She waited 9 months before issuing her ruling and then gave the legislature 30 days to rush through the whole process, and then took 40 days to again make her final ruling, which then happened to be on the last minute possible, taking away all that right to continue forward through the court process. It's wrong in the way she structured that for this to happen.
When we look at the judicial system, it seems like they don't have enough people to get the jobs done. Do you believe that she was working up into the literal last minute to get that in and to get it filed? Or do you think that there was some maybe gamesmanship going on in the timing of the filing?
Yeah, I believe there's probably gamesmanship that happened, and because when she, at the end of the oral arguments in January, she said time is of the essence on this. I'm going to have a ruling by June. That ruling didn't come till almost September. So I don't know what happened, but either way, the judge owes it to the people of the state to make a ruling in a timely manner, not draw it out to the very last minute. That's what's really one of the really frustrating parts to us in the legislature, because we've been scrambling for the last week, like you just said, what do we do next? And that's when, if you get outside what the Constitution says, that's where it creates this chaos. If we just follow the Constitution, follow the plain language in the reading of the Constitution, then our democracy works, our republic form of government works. When you take that away, it creates this chaos, and that's what's happened.
So going back to the Constitution, and that's the big question here, is whether the judge followed the state of Utah and the Constitution.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, Article 9 in the Constitution could not be more clear, that it says it's the legislature's job and the legislature's role to do redistricting and to draw the lines and to produce the map. And that's what's so unfortunate about this. What you just had was a judge, one unelected judge, make the decision for 3.5 million Utahns over the top of the 104 lawmakers elected from all across the state. You had one elected judge, and to make the decision, okay? And to make it even worse, this judge picked a map drawn by a far left organization tied to the Democratic Party. And that's the map she picked, was that organization drew the map over the top of the people. That's what's so hard for the legislature and for the people to understand through this process, is how that could happen, especially when you look at the plain language of Article 9 inside of our Constitution that clearly delineates the role of redistricting to the legislature.
This is obviously a Utah issue, but you mentioned there was outside spending and outside groups. So do you believe this was really fought by the National Democratic Party in the state?
Absolutely. All the money that came to fight this came from national money, national organizations pushing Democrat candidates across the country. country. Again, you've seen this play out in other parts of the country. Unfortunately, this judge took Utah and threw us right into the national debate on redistricting. And that's why you saw Hakeem Jeffries jumping up and down for joy over this, is because you had this judge that did it. Again, over the top of the 3.5 million people of the state, one person made that decision.
It's interesting when you look at that and one person, a judge, making a ruling on this, because we have the Utah State Constitution, then we have Prop 4, which was an initiative by the people, which sort of muddied the waters, where the Constitution says that the legislature should do it, better boundaries in their effort, push for a redistricting effort that would be nonpartisan. So it was neither the nonpartisan group nor the legislature that did this. So is that part of the issue here?
Well, and that's a fair argument, but it's not accurate. So let me just come back to Prop 4, okay? So let's just say that that's accurate, that you say legislature follow Prop 4. That's fine. We will follow Prop 4 if that's what the law says, which according to the Supreme Court, that's what the law says. But the judge is bound by those same rules. But the judge did not follow Prop 4. Again, let's lay this out. The judge picked her own process outside of what the people passed with Prop 4. Again, they're contradicting those that want to say follow Prop 4. Okay, so legislature's in charge of it. The legislature's in charge of following Prop 4 that was passed by the people. The judge put together a process outside of Prop 4, outside of what the legislature's passed as well. So that doesn't work with that argument. And nowhere in the Constitution and nowhere in Proposition 4 does it give the authority to unelected judges who are not held accountable by the people to pick a map. And that's what you've seen happen. And that's why, again, not just a map drawn by a far left organization tied to the Democrat Party and across the country.
There have been calls as soon as just a few minutes after that the judge's ruling dropped for possible impeachment hearings for that judge. Do you believe that's the right way to go, or is that the wrong direction for the legislature?
The legislature's not been focused on that as a whole. We're focused on what's the next steps. We want our first thing that we're focusing on is following the Constitution and getting the power back to the people that just got taken away from the people. That's our number one focus right now. The discussion will come around impeachment. I'm not sure what will happen or what won't happen. I'm not here to say that. But our number one goal right now is bringing that back to the people, to where the people's elected representatives draw a map that's fair to the people, not a judge from a far left organization.
But at this point, for people who are listening, and there's a lot to understand right now, it's a done deal for 2026 at this point?
We're doing everything we can for 2026. The unfortunate part is we would like to make an appeal to the Supreme Court. The problem is the deadline has come and gone, so which it makes it really hard for us. We're still looking at every option. There's a couple things that's being floated that we're trying, but unfortunately, I don't know what's going to happen for 2026. We're hoping for some miracle to come in and say, no, this isn't right, which we all know that it's not. But there's 2 or 3 things happening that we'll see that play out over the next week and see what happens.
We have an interesting setup in our government where the lieutenant governors over the elections. The governor said that he backed the concept of an appeal. So the governor's saying, yes, let's appeal, but the lieutenant governor is saying, no, we've got our deadline.
Well, yeah, so that's interesting. So the governor backs an appeal, and we will do an appeal. I just want to make that sure we're going to appeal. The problem is, because this judge structured it in a way to drag it out till the very last second of the deadline, everybody's hands are tied. And so, we can't go make an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court because our hands are tied on that. The deadline has came and gone.
Have you been having these discussions just within state leadership, or are you talking to national leadership and getting the Republican Party nationally involved now as well?
Well, obviously, but we're more focused on what's happening here in Utah. We're having discussions all across the country, coming up with different ideas. But again, we're more focused on having discussions with the governor, having discussions with the lieutenant governor, having discussions with the Senate, having discussions with the brightest legal minds around, saying what can we do? And again, you brought up the governor, and he sees that the courts did not follow the Constitution, and we appreciate his support throughout this as well.
One of the interesting things that's come out of this is that even Better Boundaries, when you heard them talking about this originally, was the concept that you would have more competitive districts in Utah. So there would be an exchange of ideas, but this map is plus 14 or 24 to Democrats. So it doesn't get you any close to an exchange of ideas. It's probably like a solid blue.
Yeah, and that's an unfortunate part. And that's one of the problems facing our country around the, not just here in Utah, but around the country, is you're having people get elected from the extreme fringes on both sides. And what this map does is it further entrenches that, right? When you have a plus 40 district on a Republican side and a plus 24 district on a Democrat side, there's no way for that middle ground to happen. And so what you end up with is the fringes on both sides. And we need to get away from the fringes on both sides and just come to basic, normal Utahns running for office, getting elected with common sense ideas. But instead, this map actually divides that further and it goes against what Better Boundaries was really set out and trying to do. And that's why you've actually seen some of the leaders of Better Boundaries come up and say, this isn't what we intended to happen. And I appreciate those leaders that have stepped up and said that.
Did you like Map C that was offered up after the legislature had to go redraw? It made it so there was actually 2 districts that seemed like they could be competitive.
Well, I just want to say I liked Map 2021 map the best, okay? But Map C was a map that we went through a process on that followed what the judge said to a T. We really worked hard as a legislature in that very short period of time that was given us. We would have much rather went through a Prop 4 process, right? If that's what we had to do. We'd have much rather went through that Prop 4 process versus the process that the judge laid out. Again, we had a judge that legislated from the bench, didn't follow what the legislature passed, didn't follow Proposition 4, came up with her own process. Even still, beyond that, we worked really hard as a legislature to follow that. What came after that was was Map C. Ultimately, I supported that because it went through that process and that public process. Although on a very short timeline, it went through that process and it was passed by an overwhelmingly support of the legislature. So that's the map I supported because it went through that process.
There's different layers to this, so people watching at home for Prop 4, there's also the Utah GOP leadership, the party that's working on a repeal, another initiative of Prop 4. Do you support that?
Yeah, I do. I do support that, again, because this is what this has led to. We can't have unelected judges making the decision for all 3.5 million Utahns. That is not democracy. That is not what our Constitution contemplates. That is a way to get, the repeal of Prop 4 is a way to get us back to what our founders and what our Constitution says, and a democracy. One person making the decision, one unelected person making the decision for 3.5 million Utahns, it is wrong. And I just want to say, for those that are cheering the redistricting decision on this, the precedents this sets for something in the future, that is flat out scary. You have one judge making such a big decision over the top of the elected officials of the state. Man, what comes next, right? So if you're cheering the
Are you ready for your own No Kings protest?
Right? I mean, you talk about no kings, right? And I just, what comes next after this? And that's why the legislature is saying this can't be allowed to stand. That's why the governor came and said this cannot be allowed to stand. And so we're going to work whatever we can to make it happen. And ultimately it will be a vote of the people at the end. And I hope they understand the gravity of this situation.
For people at home right now who are watching this and don't understand all the deadlines really quickly, November 10th, why was it so important that she has that? Walk us through what happens between now, November 10th, and New Year's.
So there is a lot of work. Once those maps are drawn, you have to then go draw precincts and all sorts of different things inside those maps that then becomes very hard and very complex. There is a lot of work that now has to be done by the election officials across our state, whether it's Lieutenant Governor's office or whether it's the county elected clerks that then have all the work to go in and do behind this. And so filing for office starts in January, and all that work has to be done by the time people go start filing for office.
There have to be solid districts
Yeah.
and precincts before you file.
And again, I wish that was November 10th deadline wasn't there. I got on the phone with the governor office saying, please, can we move this back? Can we move this deadline back? And unfortunately, we were told no, that we cannot move this deadline back because there's so much work that has to be done. And they, again, the original deadline was November 1st. It then got pushed back, to November 10th. We've just ran the clock out. The judge ran the clock out on us, and now our hands are tied. And it's unfortunate because that decision on waiting till the very last minute took away the voice of the people going to the court and fully exhausting the court process. And it's hard not to think, was it done on purpose? It's hard not to think that.
Anything else you'd want people to know?
I think I said it.
Okay. Very good.